Little girl purchases a gift for mom. Then Sandra Bullock enters and shifts everything. Before we delve into this tale, let us know your location as you watch. If you appreciate stories like this, subscribe to the channel because tomorrow we will present another special story for you. It was a crisp December evening in 2024, and 10-year-old Sophie Martinez had just emptied her piggy bank to buy her mom a Christmas gift when Sandra Bullock walked in, changing everything. Sophie had been saving every coin she could find for months. Her mom, Maria, a single mother at 35, had been her rock since Sophie's father departed when she was merely a baby. Maria worked long shifts as a nurse's aide at the local hospital, her scrubs always neatly pressed despite their frayed edges, and spent her nights studying textbooks. Dreaming of becoming a registered nurse one day, money was consistently tight in their small Atlanta apartment. Yet Maria never allowed Sophie to feel it. She transformed her tiny two-bedroom home into a sanctuary with her infectious laughter and endless love, making even the simplest meals feel like feasts through her creative touches and warm smile. Sophie understood that her mom loved Christmas, despite their limited decorations or gifts. This year, she was set on giving her something special, something that would light up her eyes the way they used to before the long shifts and late-night study sessions became their everyday norm. She had noticed her mom pausing in front of the jewelry store window 3 weeks ago, her weary eyes lingering on a delicate heart-shaped locket. Maria gently touched the glass, whispering maybe someday before rushing to catch her bus to work. That someday was today. Sophie had counted out precisely $15.42, all in coins and crumpled dollar bills she gathered from couch cushions, birthday cards, and her weekly chores. After school, she had walked 8 blocks to the store, clutching her Ziploc bag of savings, her heart filled with hope and determination. Little did she know this ordinary December evening was on the verge of becoming extraordinary in ways she could never imagine. Approaching the counter, her hands were trembling from a mix of excitement and nervousness when her heart suddenly sank. The elderly cashier looked at her kindly but shook her head. "I'm sorry, sweetheart," she gently said, "but the price went up last week during our holiday sale. It's now $25. Sophie's eyes filled with tears as she desperately recapped her savings, rearranging the coins on the glass counter. $15.42. No matter how often she counted, the total wouldn't change. "Please," Sophie murmured, her voice catching. "Isn't there anything you can do? It's for my mom. She works so hard, and I just want to give her something special." The cashier's eyes softened with sympathy, but helplessly gestured at her manager nearby. Sophie began to gather her coins, each one feeling heavier than the last, when a gentle voice spoke behind her. "Let me assist you with that." Sophie turned and froze. There stood Sandra Bullock, dressed casually in a black sweater and jeans, her warm brown eyes crinkled with kindness as she smiled at the astonished little girl. The cashier's mouth dropped open, and a few nearby customers paused to stare. Sandra crouched down to Sophie's level, her voice soft and caring. "Is this for someone special?" Sophie nodded, suddenly shy but unable to contain her hope. "It's for my mom," she managed to say. She really liked it when we saw it before, but her voice faded as she glanced at her insufficient savings. Sandra's eyes softened even further as she stood, pulling out her wallet. "Tell you what," she said, handing a crisp $50 bill to the cashier. "This one's on me." And she added with a warm smile, "Let's make sure it's beautifully gift-wrapped. Every mom deserves something special at Christmas." The cashier's hands quivered slightly as she accepted the money, and Sophie stood there clutching her Ziploc bag of coins, struggling to believe what was unfolding. But Sandra Bullock wasn't finished yet. She placed a gentle hand on Sophie's shoulder and said something that would change everything. "You know, I think your mom sounds pretty amazing. Would you tell me more about her?" Sandra and Sophie strolled through the quiet corner of the store, Finding a small bench near the jewelry counter, the actress listened earnestly as Sophie's stories poured out, sharing about her mom with increasing confidence. She recounted how Maria would return home exhausted from her nursing aide shifts, her scrub sometimes marked with evidence of her long day, but would still sit with Sophie to assist with homework. How her mom turned studying medical terms into playful games while cooking dinner, making Sophie giggle. She so desperately wants to become a real nurse. Sophie explained, her small fingers fidgeting with the beautifully wrapped locket box. She studies every night after she believes I'm asleep. Sometimes I hear her practicing procedures out loud or see her fall asleep with her textbooks. Sandra's expression grew thoughtful, her eyes reflecting deeper understanding with each word. Just then, a well-dressed woman in a sharp blazer, Sandra's assistant, approached them discreetly. "Miss Bullock, could I have a word?" Her tone was professional but urgent. Sandra nodded, turning to Sophie with a warm smile. "Give me just 1 minute." "Sweetheart, don't go anywhere." "Okay." Sophie watched as Sandra and her assistant conversed in hushed tones several feet away. She couldn't hear their conversation, but she noticed Sandra's expression shift from surprise to determination. The actress nodded several times, pulled out her phone, and made a quick call, her free hand gesturing animatedly as she spoke. When Sandra returned, her eyes were sparkling with purpose. She sat back down next to Sophie, her voice gentle yet excited. "Sophie, I have a question for you, and it's very important. If your mom could have one wish come true right now, aside from wanting to spend more time with you, because I can tell you're her whole world, what would it be?" Sophie didn't hesitate. "To finish her nursing school." She replied softly. "She's already taken some classes, but she had to stop because of money and because of me. She has to work so much to take care of us." Sandra's face lit up with a determined smile. "Sophie, what would you say if I told you we might be able to help fulfill that wish?" The actress reached into her bag and pulled out a business card, handing it to Sophie. "This is my personal assistant's number. I want you and your mom to call this number tomorrow morning. Can you do that for me?" Sophie nodded, holding the card as carefully as she was holding the gift-wrapped locket. Sandra leaned in closer, her voice warm with sincerity. "You know, sometimes the best Christmas gifts aren't the ones we can wrap in a box. Sometimes they're the chances we give people to realize their dreams. Your mom has done so much for you, and you've shown such love trying to do something special for her. Now let's join forces to do something even more amazing." As Sandra spoke, her assistant returned with a manila envelope that the actress tucked into Sophie's backpack with conspiratorial wink. "Don't open this until you're home with your mom. Okay? And remember, make that call first thing tomorrow morning." Rising, Sandra gave Sophie a gentle hug and then pulled back with a playful grin. "Now, let's get you home before it gets dark. I have a feeling tomorrow is going to be a very big day for the Martinez family." She couldn't have known it then, but as she exited the store holding Sandra Bullock's hand, that manila envelope contained the start of a journey that would not only alter her mom's life, but their entire future. The locket she had intended to purchase would transform from just a Christmas gift into a token of the moment everything changed. All because of a little girl's love for her mother, which touched the heart of someone who had the capability to make dreams come true. The following morning dawned bright and crisp, finding Maria and Sophie seated at their small kitchen table, the manila envelope positioned between them. Maria's hands trembled as she opened it, her eyes widening as she read the contents. Inside was a complete scholarship application for the nursing program at Emory University, along with a personal letter from Sandra Bullock herself. However, what caused Maria's eyes to brim with tears wasn't just the scholarship. It was the additional documents promising to cover all associated costs, textbooks, uniforms, childcare for Sophie, and even living expenses so Maria could reduce her work hours to focus on her studies. "I don't understand." Maria whispered, her voice thick with emotion as she looked at her daughter. How did this happen? How did Sandra Bullock even? Her voice trailed off as Sophie excitedly recounted the story of yesterday's events, the words spilling out in enthusiastic bursts. As she listened, Maria kept touching the locket around her neck, as if trying to convince herself this wasn't merely a dream. With trembling hands, Maria dialed the number on the business card. The conversation that followed would later feel like a blur, with Sandra's assistant efficiently guiding her through the details, explaining how the actress had been moved by Sophie's devotion and Maria's determination. By the end of the call, Maria secured an appointment with the university's admissions office for the following week. That evening, as mother and daughter cuddled on their worn but cozy couch, Maria held Sophie close. "You know," she said softly, "I always thought I was the one taking care of you. But look at what you did. You cared for me in the most extraordinary way." Sophie beamed, snuggling closer to her mom. "That's what family does, right?" The ensuing weeks were a flurry of activity as Maria completed her application, went through interviews, and, with Sandra's endorsement and support, was accepted into the nursing program. The actress fulfilled every promise. But she did something even more remarkable. She remained in touch, becoming a quiet yet steady presence in their lives. One particularly memorable evening, about a month into Maria's first semester, Sandra surprised them with a visit to their apartment. She arrived without fuss, bringing a simple homemade lasagna and a bag full of study guides. "I thought we could all have dinner together," she said with a warm smile, and perhaps helped Maria prepare for her upcoming anatomy exam. That night, their tiny apartment echoed with laughter as Sandra attempted to pronounce challenging medical terms, deliberately mispronouncing them to make Sophie giggle. Maria, feeling more relaxed than she had in years, shared stories about her classes and her increasing confidence. The three of them lingered around the kitchen table long after the lasagna had disappeared, feeling more like old friends and people united by chance. Just before leaving, Sandra paused at the door, turning to Maria with sincere eyes. "You know," she said softly, "balancing school, being a mother, building a new future. It's incredible. But what's even more remarkable is having a daughter like Sophie who believes in you so much that she made this happen." She glanced at Sophie, who was radiating pride. "Sometimes our angels come in small packages, don't they?" 3 years later, on a bright spring morning, Sophie sat in the audience of Emory University's graduation ceremony, her heart overflowing with pride. At 16, she was now old enough to fully grasp the significance of what her mother had achieved. Maria stood among her fellow graduates, her nursing pin gleaming on her gown, her eyes searching the audience until they met Sophie's. In the row behind Sophie sat Sandra Bullock, who had quietly attended every significant milestone of Maria's journey, keeping her promise to see this through to the end. When Maria's name was called, Sandra squeezed Sophie's shoulder, whispering, "Look what your love initiated." Sophie clutched a heart-shaped locket, the very one that had begun it all that Christmas evening, now holding a tiny graduation photo of her mom on one side and their family photo with Sandra on the other. Maria approached the stage confidently, accepting her diploma, tears of joy streaming down her face. The woman who once wore worn-out scrubs and studied under lamplight after double shifts was now Nurse Maria Martinez, BSN, graduating with honors. In the audience, several of her professors beamed, having heard the story of how she got there, witnessing her unwavering commitment. After the ceremony, as they gathered for photos, Maria drew both Sophie and Sandra close. "I have something to share with you both," she said, her voice quivering with excitement. "I've been offered a position in the pediatric unit at Children's Healthcare of Atlanta." Sandra's face lit up. She knew this had been Maria's aspiration, to work with children and their families. to provide for them what she longed for during those challenging years. That evening, they celebrated at their apartment. No longer the tiny two-bedroom they began in, but a comfortable home filled with books, memories, and dreams realized. Sandra brought champagne for the adults and sparkling cider for Sophie. As they sat around the dining table, Maria raised her glass. "To my daughter," she said, her voice thick with emotion, "who believed in me enough to empty her piggy bank and transform our lives. And to you, Sandra." She turned to the actress who showed us that sometimes angels wear casual sweaters and carry lasagna. Sandra smiled but shook her head. "I just opened the door," she said softly. "You two did all the hard work. You showed the world what love, determination, and faith in one another can achieve." She reached into her bag, pulling out an envelope that looked remarkably similar to the one from that Christmas 3 years ago. "And speaking of doors opening, Maria, remember how you mentioned wanting to eventually pursue a master's degree?" Sophie observed her mother's eyes welling up with fresh tears as she opened the envelope, realizing that their story was not concluding. It was just beginning a new chapter. As she touched the locket around her neck, she thought about that little girl counting coins at a jewelry counter, unaware that her act of love would trigger a series of events that would forever change their lives. The story of the Martinez family became more than just a tale of celebrity kindness. It evolved into a testament to the power of a child's love, a mother's determination, and the extraordinary outcomes that can arise when someone believes in your dreams. In pediatric wards across Atlanta, Nurse Martinez would go on to share her story with struggling parents, proving that sometimes the greatest gifts don't stem from what we can afford, but from the size of our hearts and the depth of our determination. Every Christmas, without fail, a package would arrive at their door, a new snow globe from Maria's collection, each one carrying a note from Sandra. "Keep believing in miracles. They sometimes start with a little girl's love."